While we're waiting, if you would download the images for Class 4 that are on Blackboard. Last semester, we started to make some of our own objects. And this semester, we'll be not only making them, but applying materials to them. So they'll render, look good. Glass will be transparent. Wood will have texture and grain. I'd like to start all of us just with a simple little plan. I'm going to start a new project. I'm going to use the residential default template. It's the simplest. I'm going to clean it up a bunch. I just want a very simple little stage for us to do our work on. All the objects in the Revit database, all the furniture, everything, we can apply. Most of those come with materials assigned to them, fairly generic carpet or wood siding or oak flooring or something. Revit comes with, I don't know, several thousand of these, and we can make our own. I'm thinking of a studio a couple of years ago where the project was to design an urgent care center in a storefront in New York, and they wanted the windows, but they wanted privacy for the waiting room. And so the student ended up making her own glass material that was frosted ferns etched into the glass, and the glass itself went from dark blue up to light green or something. A completely custom material for that particular use, and we can be doing all of that. And that's another day or two down the line, but I'll get started with this. And this is where Revit and Photoshop are going to start to overlap, where we can start to make our own materials, either from existing photographs or from stuff that we decide to paint or draw or bring in from the web. I'm going to quickly make a little stage set for us, a floor that has a material and a wall that doesn't really, and I'll use the wood finish. And then I'll put a wall along the back. And I'm going to use the exterior wall that's a wood shingles on or wood siding on wood stud. And the only thing I want to make clear here is I want to make sure that the flipper arrows on a wall are always on the outside face as the wall gets defined in our type properties. Anyway, so if we go into our 3D view, and go to a rendered view, realistic view. And I think I'll just stay in this view so we can be aware of the colors of things all the time. And one thing I found weird in the previous versions of Revit, if I just created something in this 3D view, if I just go to Component, Model in Place, let's say it's Casework, and went to extrude it. This is not really part of the class, but just something I noticed. If I'm just going to make some sort of cube, let's make it 4 feet high. Okay. It's way down there. It's down on the, like the sub-basement level. And really, for all the stuff that I'm doing in this model, if I create things off in space, I want them to be on my first floor level 1. So what I'm going to do is go over to Architecture, a work plane, set work plane, pick a plane, and I'm going to say I want the first floor. I could pick that, or I could pick the floor itself, but I'll say I want to pick the first floor level. So then now when I create stuff or place furniture, it will be there. And that setting that work plane stays with this view, this particular 3D view. I'm going to turn all these guys off. Hide in view category. And delete this guy. Let's look at a couple of the visualization options we got here. Every view here is going to have the wireframe option, monochrome hidden line, shaded, and then this one called consistent colors, which is sort of like shaded, but not quite. I hardly ever use these two, frankly. Textures, which is a new one with this release of 24, which shows the textures, and then the realistic one is going to be dealing more with showing reflections, light and shadow, that kind of stuff. Here are all 6 current visual styles with somewhat different ways of displaying materials. Your choice. I'm just going to be staying in this last one. And let's turn shadows on as well here with graphic display options for this view. And in pretty much every view can have this. And I'm just going to turn on cast shadows. Those are ones that come from the sun. Shadows that don't fall on another object are cast onto the current level of the view, in this case, the first floor level, just to help us visualize stuff. So let's go to the materials manager. We're going to be spending a lot of time there today. Manage materials. Oh, and it's worth looking. Just a second. If we pick this floor, and then go into edit type and structure, we can see that the top finish of this floor is known to Revit to be 3/4 of an inch thick for typical flooring, and it has that image of the oak floor attached to it. So these materials are all ones that come right out of our materials manager or materials browser, same thing. So if we go into the materials manager, manage materials, this actually goes a lot farther, has a lot more information about materials than just how they appear, because the structural engineer needs to know how much the building weighs. The HVAC guys need to know the thermal properties of the walls. So when we look at any particular material, we're going to be getting a couple of different kinds of properties of it. We have this one, just identity, just basically what its name is. We've got graphics, which is how it appears in the non-rendered views. Be just representing a ceiling grid is just lines 24 inches on center, but no color, no little speckles attached to them. Kick over here for a second. Physical is going to be how much they weigh. 18 pounds per cubic foot. Thermal is their BTUs per hour per foot per degree Fahrenheit. We really don't care about this stuff. The only things I'm going to be dealing with are what appears on the graphics tab, which is how things appear in, let's say, in a hidden line mode. And then appearance is how it starts to appear when we're dealing with a color or a photographic image applied to it. In this one interface, we see the materials that have been loaded into this project, much the way that furniture components can be loaded. And we can modify them. For instance, a lot of wood windows and doors will have a material called trim attached to them, for interior and exterior trim. And if we decide we don't want that to be this wood tone, we can change it to white, and then all of our doors and windows that use that material name would change to white in our views here. So we can look at the materials that are here and modify them as we need. We can duplicate them. So if we wanted to have a trim and a trim 1 and trim 2, or trim yellow and trim green, we could duplicate these, rename them, and change them as desired. We can create new materials entirely from scratch, where if you have a photograph of wallpaper that you want to use, we can create a new material, use that image, and have that then spread across your walls. Let's see, drag this up. We can also explore the libraries of additional materials that Revit provides and load them into our project as needed. We can get these from the Revit AEC materials library, or can download manufacturers' materials libraries like from Steelcase or Herman Miller and use those. Up here, these are project materials. These are ones that are the part of this project that they just come with a template. And down here is the list of, here we go. AEC materials drop down, and we can look at metals and then decide we want this particular steel paint finish blue and bring that up into our selected steel high grade by mistake up into our model, and now that's going to be available to us. So this is really just like going into load family and bringing something from Revit families into this project. You're going to a library, you're bringing something from the library into it, and then once it's here, we can adapt it, duplicate it, whatever. In addition to what's going on over here, we see a preview. Let's pick a better, I'll go to carpet. We have a couple of different ways to see each one. And that's this little thing called scenes, where we can see this on a sphere, And this is actually rendering as we go. It's not a canned image. We can see that on a cylinder, just in case one of these options is something that you need to visualize. If we go to the glass ones, go to glass. Second, we can see that on a wall. There are a couple of different options there. And lastly, there are a couple of different lighting options, like exterior. You know, I'm not really. I haven't really used these very much. Snowfield, whatever that means. But a couple of different one of those, so you can see how it might work in different lighting circumstances. And you can change the size of that by dragging the this right there. A question from the floor about how long it takes to generate these little views. It has to render it. Yeah, it takes a little time. So I usually keep these pretty small just to save rendering time. And I usually just use the cube. Get a little sense of the three-dimensionality of something. So here are a list of materials. To make what's currently in our project more easily accessible, we can then shut down the library panels so we get our materials on the whole screen. These sort alphabetically by name or in reverse alphabetical order. Okay, so applying materials. There are two ways to do this. One is just to apply a material to a face, just like painting it with a roller or a brush. Another is to apply a material to an entire object. And we'll deal with the first one first. And that's done with the paint tool, which is in Modify, Paint. And I don't know if we can see this. That little icon up there, it's a circle with a little checkerboard on it, which is what Revit is using as an icon representing a material, the idea of material. So if we go to Paint, click on that, then we get sort of a little mini materials browser, and we can slide down to, let's say, carpet. And once that's selected, then we can apply that. We can keep applying it to faces now. Here's a face outlined in blue. But you see, we haven't changed the back of the wall or the bottom of the slab. We're just doing face by face. And if you realize, and then it's going to keep painting things until you hit either done or escape. So done. Now I realize, I did not want to do the wall with carpet. So we can go to remove paint and take it back to whatever its original materials were. Or I could paint something else. I could replace the painting. Let's say I realize I want this to be, let's see, we've got some other kind of flooring. PT for paint. Let's say I want a brick floor. Pick brick, go there. There are no layers of paint in Revit. It's not like if we get rid of that, we're back at the carpet. If we get rid of that, we're back at the wood that we started with. So I'm going to leave that as brick and then remove the paint down here just so we don't get confused. So let me load a piece of furniture and we'll see how we might change its materials. Furniture or a table or something rather. No need to load a new family. We can just use one that's already in the model. Base cabinet. Okay. Let's just see what happens if we try to paint this. PT. Here we go. Let's see if I try to paint that with carpet. Click. Click. Not working. I can paint the wall. Control Z. But I can't paint this guy. The rule of thumb is you can only change the material of an object in the environment where it was created. So I made the wall and the floor here in the project environment. So I can do that here. I can assign materials to objects or paint faces. Since this guy was created in the family editor, I need to go back into the family editor to paint onto this guy. Let's just do that. I'll pick it, go to edit family. And I think of this as taking it back to the shop. wherever this thing got made, that's the environment I have to go back to modify it. So edit family, and just to the front of these doors, I'm going to do PT, see what's available to us here. Not many colors. I'll use earth and paint these guys right here. Let's just see what we get with the realistic. Okay, so there's dirt, and like any one, I'm going to bring it back into the project. I don't want to save the version on disk. I don't want every time I use this base cabinet to have dirt on it. So I don't want to save the changes on disk. But I do want to change what we have here. I'll pick this right there. And we'll see what then we have dirt on that guy. There's a smoother way than having to edit the model every time you want to change the color, which we'll get to, but not today. You know, the other environment we can make things is in the architecture component model in place. And let's just say we're making a piece of casework here. And I'm just going to do an extrusion on the floor, make it 4 feet high. Okay. The same limitation on painting it will apply to this as applied to the model. This was made in the family editor. I need to go back there to do it. This was made in the model in place, modeling environment, we'll call it. I need to go back there, but let's just try to paint this with carpet. And the reason I have more materials here, you know, back in the when we were editing the cabinet, there are very, very few materials. Don't need grass, don't need carpet and casework. Don't know why earth was there. So we just didn't see very many. Out here in the project environment, we got sort of all the materials for a building. I'll just pick carpet again, it's useful. And you'll notice that I can't even, I'm highlighting the floor and the wall. I can't even highlight this guy to paint on it. What I have to do is to pick it and go back to edit in place. So I'm just taking it back to the shop where it was created. Select edit in place. Now it's sort of live. I should be able to paint it now. And now you see my face is highlight because I'm in the environment where that makes sense. And furthermore, we don't need to use the same, since we're just doing it by face, we don't need to do the same material on each face. We can do different ones on different faces, however you need to do that. The other way is to assign a material to the whole object. Let's do this. Edit in place. I'm going to unpaint these guys. Select the whole object, not face by face, but select the object. And we can say its material will be over here in properties, the whole thing is going to be, let's say, cherry. Okay. So that's every single face. If we cut it, if we shrink it, who knows what that's about? You know, so we can change it. The faces keep their properties since they're part of the object. Lastly, if I've given all that, but I want the front of it to be carpet, I can select it, go back to edit in place, paint, carpet, select, finish model, like that. So a lot of ways to play that. You know, doing the whole object with one material covers everything. So no matter what direction you're looking at it from, you've got some material on it, and then you can fine tune it this way, face by face. Let's imagine that you had a column that had 20 small facets. That's one that would certainly be easier to pick the whole object and change the material of the whole object to be marble or whatever you wanted, instead of having to pick each one individually. We'll be using manage materials a lot today. So I want to make a keyboard shortcut. I just want to be able to type MM and get right to my materials browser. So that's in View. And over here under user interface, just where we were about properties, is this one called keyboard shortcuts. And you can see KS is the keyboard shortcuts to get us to the keyboard shortcuts menu. So we'll do that. And what we have here is a list of all the commands and sort of subcommands available in Revit, and then some of them have been assigned 2 or 3 letter keyboard shortcuts. So let's just type material up here. Materials, there we go. So to get to that materials browser, I want to assign, I select this, I want to assign to that. Okay. And Revit tells me that's already assigned to the mirror, one of these mirroring tools, but I never use it for that. So I'm just going to say, you know, let's do this. Let's cancel that. Let's use MB for materials browser. That makes sense. That's what it is. Okay. So we have to do. So now I just type MB, and we're into the materials browser. So while we're here, let's make a new simple material from scratch. Let's just say we want to be able to paint that cube bright red. So in the materials browser, we'll come down here to the bottom. I'll use this little sphere that Revit uses to sort of indicate materials. I'm going to use that little drop down there and say create new material. And Revit creates this material gray to start with called default new material. I'm going to, right click, rename it. And what to name it? Usually when I'm using materials, I don't want to have to scroll down all the way through the, 100 different materials to find them. So I usually just I start with an underscore, which will sort alphabetically right up to the top of the list. And then I put in BG to say this is one that I've made. And then a space, and then red paint or something like that. Let's just say red. Let's say bright red. Because I could have dark red, I could have whatever. Okay, so with it renamed, I'm then going to change its appearance. We can skip these guys right here, the information tab. I just want to change the color to bright red. So that's this right here. Used to be gray, is now red. Okay. And I'm going to change this to a cube just to be able to see it. And we're not doing anything with reflections or transparency or glowing or three-dimensional bumps or anything like that. We're just going to do red. Apply. And okay. Yeah, I'll save it. We're going to call this desktop materials. Where am I doing this? Materials demo. So we created that color called red. And then when we go to PT, here that is right up at the very top, because these sort alphabetically, and the underscore is, what are other options? This is sort by name or sort by color. Well, we'll keep sorting it by name. So if this is what I want to have, I want to paint with, I can pick that. And then any of these things that were created in the drawing, which is to say the wall and the floor, I can paint them with that. That's pretty bright, I mean, that's really bright. I think I'll go back in and tone that down a little bit. So MB for materials browser. Here it is. That usually comes up with the one that you most recently worked on. And instead of color, I'm gonna drop the color down to somewhere darker. It's no longer bright red really, but it's close enough. And if you remember, when we were talking a class or two ago about the RGB color values, the colors in the middle of the scale are pure red. At the upper end, they get mixed in with white, and at the lower end, they get mixed in with black, which is, say, equal parts of green and blue added to the red. progressively lower and lower and lower until eventually RGB and B are all at 0, which is to say black. And I'll just kick it up to here somewhere. I'll be down here somewhere, some darker red. I will not be dealing this class with the extra options here, but we'll definitely get to it soon. So we can use that on the floor. We can select this, edit in place, paint. The red is still chosen. We'll do the top with that. Finish model, and now that's red. There's not like a different red, a different previous version of that from, they're all just using the same definition of the color red here in this model at this time. We can modify the materials that are in the drawing as well. Let me get rid of the paint on here and go back to that floor, which to me is off. It's just too bright. I would like a darker wood floor. So I'm going to go back to MB for materials browser. Scroll down. I can just search for it's an oak floor. I can just search for oak and it'll bring up the, why it brings up cherry, I don't know, but here's oak. And this comes with a photograph already. We're not going to go in and put in a new photograph. We're just going to darken this one, which we can do with the tint control. And that's just sort of add whatever color is here to that initial image. We'll do that one and just see what happens. So now it looks more like walnut or something or other like that. You can play those as much as you want. So again, that was just changing the tint color. Maybe that was a little too dark. What happens if I do this? What if I tint it bright? Well, I guess that's where it starts, and tint just takes it down. Okay. Tint just takes it down. I could tint it with a little extra color too. I can maybe make it a little redder. That's a little too much. So a lot to play with. Instead of tinting, there's also the option of staining, which you might profitably employ. It tends to look more wood-like than the tinting does. I should have done that instead. Let's imagine we've decided we're using a certain Sherwin-Williams paint color, and we want to use that on our wall. That's sort of here on page 4 of the class 4 handout. We would like this to behave like a paint when it's lit and rendered. Paint comes, semi-gloss, gloss, matte, eggshell, all those different options. We might well have 3 or 4 bright white Sherwin-Williams paints. Dead flat for the ceiling, eggshell for a wall, high gloss for trim. So the way this works is this, MB. When we created our plain red color, we had available a range of generic materials options. Selectivity, transparency, self-illumination, which is glowing, 3D bumps, like that don't really pertain to the particular nature of paints. Any number of materials that are defined with assets, which is a particular constellation of these that applies to a metal, different from a paint, different from wood. So let's look at some of those. If we go down and if we open this up again and search for paint, down here in our AEC materials is a starter light gray paint material, sort of a paint template, which has what are called assets, which are basically settings for these that make it behave like a paint. So I'm going to bring this up into my, from the AEC libraries, just this generic paint, select it, and then what these 2 arrows do, the single arrow means copy it into the project materials. The arrow with the little extra thing means add it to the document and bring it up in the editor. They both essentially work the same way. So I'm going to pick paint, and it brings it up here anyhow. I'm just going to leave this one here, but I'm going to duplicate this one I'm going to duplicate the material and its assets, so we'll have this own entire standalone material definition. And let's just look at what that might be. In appearance, we don't have transparency. We don't have that. We just have these characteristics: color, finish, and what it's applied with. Which, frankly, I can't tell the difference between them. You don't like see little brush strokes, but it makes a difference to these guys. Anyway, so I'm going to take Paint, right-click, duplicate material and assets. The option of duplicate using shared assets, what it's intended for, if you might have like a family of paints that are all going to share some, let's say, a basic color, or a family of fabrics that share the same cloth texture but have different colors. The problem is when you change one of them, the others in the family will change as well. And I've found that so confusing, especially right before a project is doing, when all of a sudden all my green velvet has turned into something else because one little thing that was green velvet would change to something else. So I would really never use this duplicate using shared assets and use duplicate material and assets. So this will be its own standalone material, doesn't owe anything to any other one. And I went on the Sherwin-Williams website. Let's just do that quickly. Show you what we're looking at. Sherwin-Williams paint colors. Sherwinwilliams.com looks legit. And I know that the go ahead. I was looking for one called Azure something or other, Azure Tide, number 9684. This one right here. Azure Tide. View details. Full details. And what all the paint companies will give you is the red, green, blue numbers for that color, and how that ties into the actual squirts of pigment into your paint can at Lowe's. I have no idea. This is additive color. That's subtractive color. It's anyway. But 67, 101, 133 is what I'm looking for that color. So let's pick this paint one. We duplicated paint. Now we're going to rename this one to be paint SW. What did I say? 9684. Tide. Matte Tide. Okay. And then all that remains to do is to set the RGB values there to 67, 101, 133. Change this to matte. Change this to roller. Okay. And then we can use paint. And now, since I might be building up a lot of Sherwin-Williams paints, I'm leaving all those ones that are truly paints down in the paint category alphabetically. You'll have to sort of decide this for yourself. PQRS. Paint. Looks really light there, doesn't it? Let's see why that is. I think it's because I left that in that maybe that snowfield preview environment. Okay, that's better. So here's a question. I gave this whole cube, I made it cherry, and then painted these two faces with other materials. So I should have cherry, pretty much all the way around it except for those two. What happens when I change the material of the whole object to, let's say, this blue color? I'm going to pick it, edit in place, then select this whole object. and change its material to the this Azure Tide one. Okay, finish model. So what it boils down to is that the two faces that I painted, those materials override whatever I give to the whole object. It's not like it all reverts back. And that way, if there's some oak inlay that I want to specify, I want to paint as oak, but change the base material to see how it works together, I can do that without worrying about erasing the special painted areas. Painted materials persist through changes in the base material of the object. So that's making our own material from color. What if we want to make an entirely new material from an image? Let's say we have a photograph of carpet squares that we would like to make into a material that's some special weave or something is done for us. So that's where we start here on the middle of page 5. And one thing we need to understand with how Revit deals with images that are brought in is that the image files are not stored in the Revit model itself, but they're on disk and needs to be able to find them when it comes back to render something a second time. If we define something with a photograph of grass, define a grass material using a photograph called grass.jpg, and render it, looks fine, but then move grass.jpg somewhere else on the hard disk or erase it or rename it, Revit won't be able to find it and will just render that part of the model as gray. So it's really important to have on your computer, the one that you're working on and rendering on, a dedicated folder for images that you're using in your Revit model. I would suggest we just go into, let me close this down for a second. I would just go into your documents folder, and just the way there's a My Revit Families one that you should have, I want you to right click, new folder, and just call it My Revit Images. My Revit Images. Right here. Fix the R there. And if you always leave that, let's say you're moving from one computer to the next, you're going to upgrade eventually. You don't want to lose all these connections. Make a new folder on your new computer in Documents, My Revit Images, and copy the images over to that. And then it'll work. It's got to have that exact text search path to find the images. Okay, back to Revit. Right, I'm in the middle of page 5. I'm going to move those. In fact, I'm going to move those images here, the ones that I just downloaded. So right now, I'm going to drag these 5 downloaded images for this course into my Revit images, so they're just going to be there. And they're going to stay there. Okay, so let's make some carpet with the carpet squares. So that's going to basically involve 2 major steps. One is identifying the image that we're going to use, which is the carpet squares image. And the other is telling Revit how large that is. So when it puts it across the floor, it'll know whether those are 1-inch squares or 2-foot squares or 48-inch squares, whatever. So we go into MB for Materials Browser. We do all this in the same place. And this is just going to be a new material. We're not picking up any assets or anything like that. Create new material. I'm going to rename this. I'm going to keep this with the underscore. BG carpet squares. And then under appearance, we need to say, don't use a color, use an image. So instead of a color, we're just going to pick on image. And that, for me, that's now in Documents, My Revit Images, carpet squares. Easy. You do that once, you never have to keep looking around from other places. You might end up with carpet squares 01, 02, 03, 04 as you go on through this, but carpet squares, let's call it carpet squares 01. Let's just rename it. Carpet squares 01, open. Okay, so there that is. Now we need to tell Revit how big to make this. If we click on the image, when you bring an image into Revit, it has no idea how big that is and figures that whatever your image was, which you can see represented by the square, that it's a foot by a foot, which is not. It's actually, these are actually 2 foot squares. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4 times 2 is 8 feet. And I'm going to say, I scroll down here, say its scale is actually 8 feet. 8 feet. And these are linked together. So that'll change as well. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Then we're done with that. And here, just to visualize it, that's an awfully weird thing to be seeing carpet on. I'm going to pick a different scene. Let's say we could see it as let's see it as a plane. That's not that useful. That tends to get washed out a lot of times. Let's see it as a cube. See it as a canvas. Okay, fair enough. Cropped small, but yeah, that's what it looks like. Apply. Okay. So now I can use that just like any other material. I think what I'll do is make a rug with this. I'm just going to make a thin extrusion sitting there on the floor instead of like painting or something. It's not the whole floor, but I want this to have a little thickness to it. So architecture component, model in place. What is a rug? Huh? Well, let's call it entourage, which is basically owner supplied stuff that gets brought in after the construction process is done. I'll call it rug or rug of carpet. Carpet square. No, I'm just going to call it rug because we might change the material. Rug. Okay. And I'm just going to make an extrusion. The rectangle. I don't know how big it is right now. We won't worry about that. And I'm going to make it like 1/4 of an inch thick. Okay. So what I want to do here is assign the material to the rug. If I go to paint, I can't pick it because it was made in the edit in place environment or component in place environment. So now I need to go back there to edit in place to be able to work on it. So I'll pick it, edit in place, select it. And one of the reasons when in edit in place you have to go back and select something is we might have made an edit in place component out of 4 or 5 or more smaller objects. So we need to go back to select the object that we want to do. Pick carpet squares. Okay. Okay. A question from the floor about whether to change the material of the whole object or just to paint the top face. I changed the whole object. And I could have painted the face, but I thought it was sort of nice if the material wraps down those little edges. So right now we have all these fractional carpet squares here. I would like to be able to, let's do this. Let's pick that rug and make it an even number of feet to start with. Edit extrusion. Let me get into a plan view. Pretty close, 12 feet. The idea is to have the carpet squares come right evenly to the edges and the corners. If I turn on textures, we'll see those. So we're close, but we need to get this really accurate, especially here on the ends. But right now we have no way of moving that texture around on the object. That's what we need to do. We need to do next, which is go back into the materials editor. We're doing a lot today. We might stop pretty soon. Go back in the materials editor. And over here in graphics, right now, this is what we get in rendered views. I want in graphics to be able to have a 2 by 2 foot grid that I can move around on the object that will move the image around at the same time. So here's what we do. We say that I want to set up a surface pattern. I can't remember if we did this last time, but there are two kinds of patterns in Revit. Drafting patterns. This would be like hatching for brick or something like that. This stays the same size, like 1/8 of an inch apart, regardless of the scale of the image. What we want to use is a model pattern, which, just like the grid on the ceiling, if we see it at a larger scale, that's going to get larger or smaller depending on the scale of the view. So do we have a 24 inch? We can use, this has nothing to do with this actually being ceiling. It's going to give us a 24 by 24 inch grid. So under model, fill pattern, model, ceiling, we can pick that. So this will be our preview, our monochrome preview of where those are. And then we need to line up these lines with the image. And that's right here, texture alignment, where we take these graphic grid lines and map them onto the photograph so that you'll see how it works. Texture alignment. And this should come up shortly. And it's really hard to see. There are some little yellow lines, which if you can use the arrow keys or light gray lines, you'll have to see this on your own computer, which you can line up to the, actually it was really pretty good to start with. You can line up with the joints between the carpet squares. Okay. Apply. Okay. So now let's just go back to the hidden line view. And now you see we have those. These are now where the squares are currently. We can see that if we turn this on. Sort of pay attention to this corner down here. Go back to realistic. And we'll see that little guy there, which corresponds to this little guy here. So what we want to do is move these lines that will move the image along with them. But like all this painting stuff, we need to do it in the environment where this object was created. So we got to take this back to the shop, edit in place, and then we hover over a line, hit tab, and then click to select it. One of those lines, and then just use the arrow keys to move it so those line up. Slick, huh? With a lot of things like wallpaper, it doesn't matter, just sort of start somewhere and go somewhere, but something like carpet squares, they start in some corner and go somewhere, or center one on a wall on the door into it or something like that. So then I'll say okay, and we can preview that here. Oh, we're back in the model, aren't we? Okay, so we'll just go to the textured view, and we can see that now these line up. They got moved, jogged over. It's a really nice tool. Page 6, and we're getting there. Look, let's do that with another object. I've got let's make another material, which is going to be the brown brick image. Works much the same way. We'll just do this for practice. MB, we're going to create down here with create a new material from scratch. Right click, rename, e.g. Let's go get the image first, and then we'll work about getting the lines drawn on it. Appearance, brown bricks, image. It's this one here. You know, these have a very definite size as well. And bricks are, you know, I wrote down here what they should be, so-called standard bricks. Anyhow, bricks are basically 8 inches long from center line of joint to center line of joint, and 3 of them make up 8 inches vertically. And 4 of them, as it turns out, makes up 10 and 2/3 inches vertically. And here our scaling factors will be different. Let's scroll down to scale. Our width is 2 bricks worth, which is 16 inches. And our height is not the same, so we have to unlink these guys. We need to unlink them and change this to 10.667 inches. Close enough, 10 3/4. These are proportions that you know ahead of time, or you go measure the wall. And the reason I'm doing 10 3/4, I'm using 4 bricks instead of just 3 here. 3 would be easy because it's just 8 inches. Is that if I did that, then I would have this rectangle repeating on top of itself, and I get 2 full bricks right on top of each other, whereas I need 4 to make it go long, short, long, short, long, short, long, short. Okay, so there's that. We got, let's apply that to our wall. So apply, okay. Go back to a 3D view. Paint. Brick. When we're placing windows and other wall openings, it's useful to see in a monochrome view where those lines are, so we can get the sills like lined up with the brick course. So we'll go put a monochrome brick pattern under the graphics tab, so we can do the same thing for bricks that we did for the carpet squares, being able to adjust them exactly where we want them, and then to be able to align wall openings to them. Brown bricks, go to graphics. Let's make this something more useful. Go to the graphics tab, and again, we'll pick just this surface pattern, foreground. It'll be not a drafting pattern, but an actual model scale, real world dimensions one here. And I think there's one for bricks already. Brick right there. Already set up on that 8-inch brick, and 3 of them being 8 inches high. So that'll be our pattern on the wall when we're in a monochrome view. Go to texture alignment. And here we have to do a little more. Oh, that was pretty far off. Mine came in fine vertically, but not so great horizontally. Well, it seems to be jumping around a little bit for me. I don't have that much control. Close enough. Apply. Okay. So now when this goes back to, you can see we're starting out with a full brick right at the bottom here. If I go to a monochrome view, I end up with the full brick right on the bottom, so that's acceptable. And with all of these, if you decide you didn't want to emphasize the brick pattern that much there, if I go back to the materials browser, I can change the color of that brick, how it appears here in these monochrome views. Let's say I want to do it something much lighter. This gray down here is the 120, whatever. I'm going to kick it up to here, quite light brick. So that becomes a less dominating sort of a view. And of course, we can use that to paint things. I could paint the floor, but what I actually want to do is select this, edit in place, paint some bricks on it. I know this is a chunk. It will be doing a great deal of it. It's going to become, it's sort of like getting at your Prismacolors in terms of how familiar we're going to be with this by the end of the semester, I promise you. Okay, let me get into my plan view. Let's do a wall. I'm going to do a wall, just an interior partition. Right down here. And what I want to do for these two rooms, big room and little room, is to be able is for this wall to have some different material. I mean, maybe it's an actual brick wall, but somebody decided to come in and paint it or put chipboard up in front of it or something rather. But we want those to be different. What you do not want to do is to split that wall and make it two different types or two different walls with two different colors. For one thing, it's not how walls are built. It's built as one wall and just painted differently in the different rooms. And that's what we want to do. All that we want to do here is basically put some masking tape down the middle of this wall right here and paint on each side of the tape with different materials. The process of that is, and it's easier in a monochrome view, not in the color one, we're going to use the split face tool. And it's this little guy up, this little icon up here, which looks like a little television or something or other, basically means we can see the little movie going on. We're going to define an area within one face, one flat surface, and be able to paint that with a separate material from the main one. We're not creating any extra objects. We're just putting masking tape up and painting inside the masking tape. Here's how this works. And if this were on the rug, I'd have to go into edit in place. But if it's just a wall that was created here, I can select it here. And, or I guess I didn't have to do that. I just go to split face. And then I need to pick the face that I'm going to split. In this case, it could be the top, it could be the front, it could be the side, it could be the floor. I want it to be this face of this object. You pick it on an edge and select it. And if you see, we get these sort of yellow, light brown lines, which are the color of masking tape. So this is what we do. And the trick here is we can divide the face a number of times. Each time we can only divide it into two separate faces. If you need to do it into more than that, you just keep iterating, do it, and then do it again, and then do it again. So I'm just going to draw a line from here, from one yellow line to another yellow line. That's it. I don't go around the edge again. There's already masking tape around the edges. We're just doing the one down the middle where we have to do it. Say okay. And now, when I highlight that wall, you can see that there's a line down the middle. And if I go to paint, I'll pick the carpet squares and paint that with carpet squares. That's straightforward. Let's get to my realistic view. So one wall, carpenters build it all that way, not multiple layers, nothing like that, just paint it. We can also paint within an object. If I use the tool here, and let's say we wanted to put, I pick split face, I pick this face, the blue one again. Let's say I want to have a round red circle painted there. And that's not showing up here in the textures because there's no texture assigned to it, but there is realistic assigned to it. And let's see if I can divide that in half. Split face. I pick that. Okay. So as long as you're just dividing one face into two separate areas each time, you can sort of keep on subdividing that as much as you want. But let's try something else. Let's make a rustic pattern, rustic wood pattern. We're going to go down to new material, rename, and let's call this, and the appearance I want to use is the board's JPEG here. I don't know how big these are, length or width, but we'll need to tell Revit something so it will know how to display them. But let's just say that they're 6 inches high, each board. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 boards. Let's say that that's going to be, sorry, scale 7 foot. 14 boards, 7 foot. And we'll leave this a 7 foot length as well and just see how that works out. Oh, I wanted to call this BG rustic boards, didn't I? Okay. Now let's map that onto the brick here. Paint, sorry, PT. Rustic boards. It's not as high resolution an image as the others. It's a little fuzzy, but it's all right. The problem with this image is that we've got this little extra part board here that there's no way to trim out in Revit itself. We're going to need to go back into Photoshop and I guess here's the bottom of the image and sort of get rid of that little edge down there. So we're just going with full boards. So Photoshop. What Revit and computer games do and all that kind of stuff, when they're putting materials onto a surface, there's always a rectangular image that gets, it's called tiled off that way and tiled off this way until it hits the end of the object. For the record, ladies and gentlemen, this image is, ladies, we're in class. It's not a square image, the original. If this is 7 feet, this is probably like 10 or 11, something like that. So what we really just need to do is use the crop tool. And what I want to do is, since I see that I've got a little bit of shadow up there, I want to come down here to the bottom and crop this right up to, so like the middle of the shadow there. So those two shadow lines will just blend. And I've already gone through what it takes on this image to hit enter to make that happen, to make the ends merge. Or, it's sort of like if it's wrapping around a can, you want them to touch and not see a seam. So I'm going to save file. I'll do save as. This is a JPEG. I'm going to save it as boards, called boards fixed, or boards seamless is actually what the name that we use for images that tile with no obvious joint. With these guys, actually all these, the joints are, well, with these two, the joints are obvious. Where things touch falls onto a joint or, through the mortar joints. Here it'll be a little differently. Here we'll have to figure it out. But here it's just the one direction. Boards seamless save. We'll keep the quality high. I'm going to keep Photoshop open so we can get back to it without doing all of that again. Go back to Revit. And now we just need to redefine the material so Revit will catch up with this current version of it. MB. Rustic boards. Oh, it's not there. You see the old versions there. We actually want to go down to boards JPEG and say I want to use the seamless version of that. Okay. And I'm going to change I'm going to stretch it out. Right now it thinks it's square, which it's really not. So let's say it's 7 feet. Deselect that. How do I do that? 11 feet. I expect to see it like a color change or something or other. Done. Apply. Okay. That's a lot bigger. Why did that jump? Oh, I think I got the height and the width dimensions confused. B, somebody, if you see me doing that, you're more than welcome to call my attention to it. Yeah, I gave the height to be 11, so this is the 11 feet. You have to put the feet in here. It doesn't 7 feet. Done. Okay. Done. Apply. Okay. Okay. Looks good. It's a little fuzzy. That's just the nature of the image I started with. And sometimes you'll find a really great image. It's just what you want, but when you actually apply it and see it at scale, it doesn't work. So there are things we can do in Photoshop. You can use there's a filter called Sharpen, which sort of removes some of the fuzziness, makes it a little grittier. Let's take a quick look at that. If I'm just selected the whole thing, I'll go filter, sharpen. See, getting a little more contrasty. Filter, sharpen more. Sure. Very rustic. So you have those sort of options are there. I'm just going to keep that as long as. Let's see if it makes a difference in how the thing looks on the screen. Control S. Minimize. Revit. Oops. All right, here's where I pick update that. Okay. So a little, you do what you have to do. It would look a little better if they were 4 inches high instead of 7 inches, 6 inches high. Okay, let's look at another one. See what's involved. Oh, and this one we could put we could create a pattern. Let's do that because this would be a custom pattern that we'd have to make. I forget. No, so I want to be in materials browser, rustic boards, graphics. That's where I want to be. Foreground pattern, model scale. Oh, 6 inch parallel. We can just use that. That's fine. Do some alignment with it. They're hard to see. And now we can go over to hidden line and see those. They're pretty much right on the button. Okay. I want to show you what you can do in Photoshop to preview how images will tile. Go back to Photoshop. Let's pick this. And if we go to View Pattern Preview, I don't have it in here. View Pattern Preview. takes the image that we have. Okay. And you can see this light blue line is the original image. And then it's repeating that, tiling that horizontally and vertically. And you can see that that's looking pretty good like that. On a large enough scale, you can start to see the repeats pretty obviously. There's sort of this dark area that repeats. But this is a good way to do that. And then view, unpattern preview. I saved this one already, so I'll close it. Well, let's say, sure, we'll save it. Now let's go open this next one I have, it's just called pattern. So it's not really that high resolution, so we might be wanting to use it, on a wall, maybe 6 inches high or something. But this is a fun one to see with the pattern preview. You can start to see how that will start to look on a wall. So just a very small part of it, you can sort of project that as far as you want. And what's fun too here is if we can edit this, and then these guys, they will all change, which is fun. Let me just draw something. The brush tool. We start seeing the implications of all the stuff that we've done. So it's pretty crazy, It's like, I don't know. This is quite a recent tool to be able to do this, so I really enjoy it. Do that, so we can get out of that. Don't change that. Go back to Revit. We can easily make a material for that. Oh, and we can color it too. That'll be fun. Let's go to new material. Put this on a more useful. Shape, and what we don't know is, a big foot by foot seems fine with me. Done. And then we can tint that if we want. Paint. So there are really no excuses, guys. We can do whatever we need to do. Okay, over and out. As you continue with Revit materials, I offer you this inspiration from two philosophers who have profoundly influenced my thinking for decades.